Hey guys, how's it going? Welcome back to the channel, New Generation HVAC. My name is Juan Maravilla, and in this video, what I want to go ahead and do is I want to go ahead and go over the high side and the low side of the air conditioning system. Now, before I go more into this video, if you haven't done so yet, I encourage you to go into the previous video that I made, where I go ahead and introduce the basic cycle of refrigeration and the four major components that make up the air conditioning system. Like that, you have a better understanding of what I'll be talking about in this video. So the link of that video will be down in the description below. So let's go ahead and move forward on the high side and low side of the air conditioning system. As you could go ahead and see here, what I did, I color coded the high side and the low side of the air conditioning system. You have the high side on this part of the system and the low side on this part of the system. Now, a little bit of a recap on the four major components of the air conditioning system. The four major components, once again, are your compressor, your condenser, your metering device, and your evaporator. And remember, these all work hand in hand with each other, and they're all connected in series with your copper lines or your copper refrigeration line sets. And the only thing that should be in those line sets should be your refrigerant and the oil that comes from the compressor. So if we go ahead and follow the flow of the refrigerant, we always start off on my compressor. Now, if I go ahead and have my compressor compress the refrigerant that's inside, what is it going to go ahead and do? It's going to go ahead and compress it, and as it's doing that, it's picking up my pressure. And what happens when it picks up my pressure? It picks up my temperature, right? So I'm going to have all this refrigerant travel into my condenser, and then it's going to go once again to my metering device, and then for my metering device, it's going to go ahead and have a drop in pressure. And when I have a drop in pressure, what do I have a drop in as well? I have a drop in temperature. All right, so let's go ahead and talk about the low side of my air conditioning system and why it's very important for me to have low pressure and low temperature, especially inside of my evaporator. Well, your refrigerant works very, very handy. In this case, it's interesting how your refrigerant works. I need to have my refrigerant at a certain state and at a certain temperature in order for me to have what's called heat transfer. All right, so when I have low pressure and low temperature and my refrigerant drops in temperature and my refrigerant drops in pressure, what's going to happen here in my evaporator is I'm going to have what's called heat absorption, right? So how that works out is that, well, growing up, I remember my parents would always tell me, hey, cierra la puerta, porque se va a salir el frío. But in reality, it's not like that. In reality, it's not, hey, close the door because you're letting out the cold. And reality is, hey, cierra la puerta, or hey, close the door because you're letting in all that warm air. You see how that works? Why? Because remember this, it's very important for us to understand this, that hot is always attracted to cold. So the hot or anything that's hot is always going to go ahead and go to anything that's cold. All right? So there's always this attraction between each other. In this case, there's always this attraction between the hot and the cold, where the hot is always going to go ahead and follow anything that's cold. So if my air coming from my outside or my ambient air goes into the coil and touches the coils and there's cold refrigerant in there, what do you think is going to happen to that heat? So the refrigerant, what's going to happen is it's going to go ahead and absorb the heat. Just imagine a large sponge, right? So you have a large sponge and you go ahead and you dip it in water. What happens to that sponge when it's dry? You dip it in that bucket of water, it's going to go ahead and absorb all that water, all right? So the same thing, the refrigerant is just absorbing all that water. It's all absorbing all that heat. And where is it taking it to? Well, now that heat is transferred. In this case, it's going to go ahead and be sent all the way into my compressor. My compressor, once again, is going to go ahead and continue compressing that refrigerant. It's going to shoot it out, and it's going to go ahead and go into my condenser. Now, on my condenser, and I know I've been guilty of this. I'm pretty sure some of y'all have been guilty of this as well. But whenever we walk next to a condenser, the system that's outside of your home, or any type of, commercial or residential building, right? What is the first thing that we normally do whenever we go buy a condenser? Well, what I normally do is I go ahead and I put my hand over the condenser, and what is it that I normally feel? I normally feel what? Warm air, right? I gotta be feeling that warm air. Well, that warm air that I'm feeling right there is actually the heat that got absorbed from my evaporator. You see how that works, right? It's very interesting how that works. The heat gets absorbed here, and the heat gets rejected over here. All right, but understand this: my temperature and my pressure need to rise higher than something. Why? Because remember when I said this, my pressure and my temperature need to go lower than my indoor air or my outdoor ambient temperature coming in. It needs to be colder. So that means my coil needs to drop colder than what my temperature is inside my home. So there could be a heat transfer. The same thing happens with my condenser. My condenser now, the temperature of my refrigerant needs to now get picked up higher than my ambient air, so that now my ambient air is able to absorb the heat from the refrigerant. And that's why whenever we put our hand on top of the condenser, once again, we feel it nice and warm, right? Now in another video, I'm going to go ahead and explain this a little bit better. I'm going to go ahead and explain the changes of state of the refrigerant and where we encounter the changes of state. And also I'm going to go ahead and show you with different examples of temperatures of how the heat transfer works better on my high side and on my low side of my air conditioning system. So with that being said, right, so now we go into, once again, the high side and the low side, and we see how it is very important to understand why I need this side to be at a low pressure, low temperature, and why I need this side to be at a high pressure, high temperature. Without them working like that, this system won't work as efficient. And without me having the proper, temperature and pressure over here, this system won't work the way it should. So it's very important to understand that there has to be a balance met between these two systems, right? Between these two parts of the systems, between these two major components, especially these two major components. For right now, it's just, once again, the basics and the understanding of how our air conditioning system is set up, the four major components, and now we move on to the temperatures and the pressures and the high side and the low side of my air conditioning system. So I want to go ahead and thank you for being here today on this video. Once again, if you have any questions, any comments, feel free to write them down below. I'll go ahead and answer them as best as I can in another video, or I'll go ahead and answer you guys back as best as I can through the comments as well. I want to go ahead and encourage you also to subscribe and to like these videos. I'm going to go ahead and try to see if I could go ahead and post these videos ever so often like that. You can go ahead and continue learning about the air conditioning system, learning about the heating system, the cooling side of my system, the refrigeration part of my system, like that. You could go ahead and continue on your HVAC journey.